Hello. Oh, why can't I hear this? That's not good. All right, we're live. 2024 presidential debate. It says it's beginning at 9 p.m. Wait, what is happening? What is happening? I can't hear anything. Oh, gosh. I thought I had fixed most of these tech problems, guys. I feel ridiculous right now. Hello? Oh, okay. Oh, wait a minute. Why do you not want to come out of my headphones? There we go. Oh, was that live the whole time? How's that? Anybody in the comments? God, what a bunch of nerds. Oh, I need to put it on the screen. It's not live. Okay. God damn, I am dumb.
Donald Trump.
There we
Polls
go.
showed that the race is a coin flip, and a good performance could provide momentum for either candidate as they enter the final sprint to Election Day, now just 55 days away.
This is the first and perhaps only time we will see these two candidates share a stage before the election, and the debate begins right now.
And Lindsay Davis.
They say right now, and then it doesn't start. God. Guy looks like a Ken doll. This looks like people in a movie pretending to be newscasters. This is wild. How are 7 people watching me on YouTube? Thank you, by the way. And yet nobody is saying anything. Won the coin flip like it's frickin' football for the pageantry of this BS. How's that volume? Someone let me know. Camel Toe Harris? I have no idea what that's a reference to. She can't say yes. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. Oh, no.
That is about
Pause.
lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
No, you're not,
I
dude.
believe
Look
in
at the last 4
ambition,
years.
the
You're
aspirations,
crazy.
the dreams
You're
of the
crazy.
American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing.
An opportunity.
We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing
We
is
see
too
the last
expensive
4
for far
years,
too many
yo.
people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me,
She's
but
not
there
gonna
was
go
a woman
well.
who helped raise us. We call her our
She's already
second mother.
nervous.
She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
I think you
My
both
opponent
did
has
that,
a plan that I
actually.
call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump
Like what?
sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no
She seems
sales
very
tax.
nervous.
It's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after
Okay.
75 years,
I'm not sure
pay
if
us
that's
back
incorrect
for
or
all
not.
that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff
That
off
did not
because it was
go
so
well,
much money they
Trump.
can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've
don't-
set
I-
out to do.
from everything
They've
I've
taken in
seen,
billions of dollars from
it did
China
not go
and
well,
other places.
his-
They've left the
his
tariffs
trade
on.
war.
When I had it, I had
Probably 'cause
tariffs,
we don't
and
make
yet I had no
anything.
inflation. Look, we've had a
Inflation is a
terrible
monetary
economy
phenomenon.
because inflation
It's
has,
from the
which is
central
really
bank.
known
It's
as
a private
country
bank.
buster. It
This is a
breaks up
separate
countries.
issue.
We
Doesn't
have
have anything to do with
inflation
this.
like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every
What's up,
class.
JC?
On top of that, we have
Good to see you, man.
millions of people pouring into
They're
our
both
country
lying so
from
far.
prisons and jails, from mental institutions, and
this is
insane
the crux of the
asylums,
issue and why I'm
they're
gonna vote
coming in and
Trump.
They're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African
taking our
Americans and
jobs.
Hispanics, and
Okay,
also
he's right about
unions.
that.
Unions
That-
are going to be
he's right.
affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in
Build
the
the wall,
history
build the
of our
boats.
country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border
why
security
I'm gonna
during
vote
this
for you.
debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond.
That's
on
that's the
economy.
one issue, guys.
Well, I would
It's
love
immigration.
to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the
And you're gonna
worst
talk about something that has to
unemployment
do-
since the Great Depression.
Because of
Donald
COVID.
Trump
It's unrelated
left
to
us
him.
the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump
Did she just
left
blame
us
COVID
the worst attack
Trump?
on our democracy since the Civil War.
That's bullshit.
And what we have done is
Abraham
clean up
Lincoln
Donald
attacked
Trump's
democracy.
mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know
Everybody's
are the
worse off than
aspirations
4
and
years
the
ago.
hopes of the American
Woman,
people. But I'm going to tell
everybody's
you on
worse
this
off.
debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired
She's going to act
playbook.
like Karen tonight. I
A
can't wait.
bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president
why don't you do
intends on
long-form
implementing
interviews?
if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much
Oh
more in
my
common
God.
than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone,
She
I have
is.
nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it.
I haven't
purposely.
read it
I'm not
either.
going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create
he
a great
actually does
economy
long-form
like I did
interviews.
before. we had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
they were printing free money.
We made ventilators
You
for
both
the
don't wanna
entire
bring up
world. We got gowns. We got
Ventilators
masks.
were
We did
bad,
things
dude.
that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding
This
the
is the
military.
dumbest
They give me
debate.
credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back
That's
jobs.
because you're
These were
pro-vaccine,
jobs,
bro.
Bounce back, and it bounced back, and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does
I don't like
everybody
either of
else.
these
Vice
people,
President
man.
Harris, I'll let you respond.
Everything coming
So,
out of both of their mouths has been BS
Donald
so
Trump has
far.
no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax
There's
breaks
no
for the
audience.
richest people. I am offering what I describe as an
You raised the
opportunity
taxes.
economy.
They lowered all
and
our taxes. The
The best
Biden-Harris-
economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative
The
plans
best
for the future
economists
of America.
in our
What
country
Goldman Sachs has said
are bought
is that
by them.
Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton
I
School
bet
has
they
said
do.
is Donald Trump's
Goldman
plan
Sachs is a really good
would
thing, right?
actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something
I don't
that
care what
would
they think.
increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look
It's the
at where
federal
we are
bank.
and where we stand on the issues.
Federal
and I
bank.
invite you to know
That's inflation.
that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
You are not on the side that should be coming out and saying that nobody has a plan.
I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors,
Who
think
cares,
my plan
brother?
is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan.
She does
and
not
it's
have a
like
plan.
4 sentences.
She hasn't talked about policy.
Like
What is
run,
her
spot,
policy?
Run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I
She
do want to
doesn't.
drill down on
She
something.
wasn't
you both
even
brought
elected.
up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this.
No, the
because
Vice President
your plan
lied
is what
about
she
sales
calls
tax.
is
I
essentially a
asked on
national
Twitter,
sales
what is
tax.
that?
Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said
You
that
just
you
straight
might
up
double your
lied,
plan,
Kamala.
imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country.
It's
As
a
you
straight
know,
up
many
lie.
economists say that with
Tariffs are
at
not
that level,
sales tax.
costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
This is a very
I was
reasonable,
the only president ever.
unbiased
China
moderator
was paying
here.
us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration.
Ooh.
We are going to take in
Are they bad?
billions
I
of
think they
dollars,
probably are.
hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the
Central
history of our country.
banks.
Because I've never
None of
seen a
you-
worse
neither of
period
you were gonna
time.
bring it up.
People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And
It
you
was
heard what
better.
the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you
Okay,
respond?
maybe he is pretty
Well, let's
unbiased.
be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history
She's
of
right.
America.
She's
He
right.
invited trade wars. You want to talk about his
It didn't
deal
work.
with China? What he ended
I was
up
supportive
doing
of
is
it back
under
then. I
Donald
was
Trump's
wrong.
presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold
the
us
China hawks
out
in here.
when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century,
She
which
talks
means
weird.
focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the
allies
race
like
on
Israel,
AI, on quantum
that you both
computing,
support?
focusing on what we need to do
We do
to
need to
support
concentrate on AI and
America's
quantum computing.
workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights.
That was
but
a
what
weird
Donald Trump did,
2
let's
seconds,
talk
but she
about
recovered
this,
it.
with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of her father's a Marxist professor in economics.
She's not a
and
Marxist.
He taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And
They're
that's
eating our
bad
cats.
for our economy,
Apparently
too. You
not,
mentioned
though.
before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have,
smart to
and
concentrate
she
on this.
has destroyed
That's the issue.
our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's
remember
why
that.
I did that, because
actually
that
puked the
predominates.
first time I heard
because
that.
they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that.
remember it very
and
specifically. I was
her
in the
vice
gym.
presidential pick,
It was
which I think was a
disgusting.
horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born is
Did he
okay.
actually say that?
And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said,
He didn't
you're gonna
say
hear a
it
bunch of
was. He
lies,
said what the
and
governor
that's not
said, and I
actually
heard
a
his words
surprising
himself.
fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And
Maybe
one
because
does
there's
not
a
have
living
to abandon
person
their
inside
faith
of their body.
or deeply held beliefs
not
to
gonna-
agree. The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with
We're just
women
gonna pretend it's not a
around
child.
our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they
Doubt it.
might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot? She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term? They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor
not- he's
that would be
already said
monitoring
he
your
doesn't believe in
pregnancies,
that.
your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
She's so
Thank you,
performative,
Vice
while I feel
President
like Trump is
Harris.
Well, there
actually
she goes
talking
again. It's a lie.
rationally.
I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time.
A lot
but
should
for
be brought back to the
52
states.
years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and
Oh
it
my
ended
God,
up being
that's a
a
good
total
one.
catastrophe.
I was saying it
The
back
student
then.
loans, and then
Wasn't gonna
her-
happen.
I think probably her boss.
There's also
if you
no
call
such
him a
thing as
boss, he
forgiving
spends all his
loans.
time on the beach. But
Where it
look,
went to the taxpayer.
her boss went out and said, "We'll do it again. We'll do it a different way." And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got.
She just is so
taunted with this
inauthentic. It
whole
feels
thing
like
about
everything
This whole idea. And
is
how unfair that would have been. Part of the
calculated. Every
reason
look,
they lost.
every
to
word.
The millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked
What's
about
up, Marshall?
that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your
What's up?
running mate,
Democracy
J.D.
required.
Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind
know why he's
if
not
he
just
has
answering
a
the question,
certain
though.
view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress.
like
do
him
it.
dodging the question.
But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples
governor of
who
West Virginia.
pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working
what is
women
happening with the immigration
who are working
that
one or
your
two jobs,
administration did?
who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why
This is framing, right?
in every state where this issue has been
'Cause
on
it's
the ballot,
abortion.
in red and blue states both,
Which
the
is
people
already-
of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing,
Fertilization.
you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and
Both of you
probably
should
after
answer.
birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root
I thought
causes
so
of
too.
migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings
They also let him
reached
cut
a
in.
record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported.
Would you have
that
done
bill
anything
would have
differently?
Put 1,500 more
was a
border
very
agents
specific
on
question.
the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying
We
to
get
do
it.
their
You're a
job.
super cop.
It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so
Why
many
didn't your
families
administration
watching
do that?
tonight
That was the
who have been
question. You were
personally
part of it.
affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill
You don't give a
would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the
What
bill.
else
And you
was
know
in that
why?
bill?
Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to
You
respond.
didn't
Let me
answer
just
the
ask, though,
question.
why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years
that
ago.
true, JC?
And
I believe that. I haven't heard
going on
anything. I
here,
haven't
you're gonna
seen
end up in
anything
World
from
War
her
III,
rallies.
just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country
Wait, wasn't
by
there that
allowing
whole
these
AI thing?
millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
I am still
of the
not sure if this
people
is
that
true.
live there. And this is what's
the
happening
Trump
in our
shrug-
country. And it's a shame.
Trump shrug is
as
pretty
far
sick.
as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase.
wild, JC.
Make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up
That's a
Springfield,
crazy
Ohio,
comparison.
and ABC News did reach out to the
We're gonna
city
be
manager
Venezuela.
there.
Used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But
television.
the people are
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
I don't know if that
Again,
happened
the
or
Springfield
not. I
city
don't
manager
know.
says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
Oh, I hate that laugh.
You know,
she
I-
just,
this
dude,
is,
Trump
I
did
think,
not
one of
look
the
good
reasons
there.
why in
But
this
that
election,
laugh
I actually have
brought
the
me back down to
endorsement
earth.
of 200 Republicans who have
Like Dick
formally
Cheney.
worked with President
Good
Bush,
person,
Mitt
Dick
Romney,
Cheney.
and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President
Do you think
Dick
John McCain
Cheney
is good?
and
Oh my
Congressmember
God, she brought
Liz
it up. I
Cheney.
thought they wouldn't like
And
that.
if you want to really know
Dick
the
Cheney,
inside
dude.
track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already,
How are you
just
proud of
ask
that?
people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has
I don't care
contempt
about
for the
that.
Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term.
Maybe the Republic
And
doesn't
when we
deserve
listen
to survive when it's
this
not even a
kind of
republic
rhetoric,
anymore. I can't believe
when
she
the
just used that
issues
word.
that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think
It's
the
immigration,
choice is
dude.
clear in this election.
Immigration.
President
you did
Trump, I'll
this.
give you a quick minute to
Harris.
respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13.
Turned it around. He is right about that.
And you take a guy like Esper,
That
he
was
was
on
no
TV,
good.
I
I
remember
fired
that.
him, so he writes
That
a
was
book.
sick.
Another one writes a book, because with me they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation.
They didn't
fire
even
any
fire
of their
Homeland Security
economists.
guy,
They have the same
Mayorkas.
people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more
far.
votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the
nerd.
vice president has reacted to as well.
Deport them.
President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You
Do
say
it.
you would
For
use
the
the
love of
National
God, do
Guard.
it.
You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you.
How'd
you
they
believe
get
that
here?
number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals.
Talk about the corporations.
Millions
Talk about
of
the
criminals.
corporations.
They allowed terrorists.
get
They
them out
allowed
by not
common
letting them
street
work
criminals. They allowed
and
people to
have-
come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime.
They're not
and it's happening at levels that nobody
they're
thought
not
possible.
President Trump, as you
writing
know,
it
the
down.
FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Okay, so you're not going to talk about immigration.
And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important
What did Trump
about
just do with
respect
his
for the
mouth?
rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people.
Like
address
what? Like
we need to
immigration,
do
which you're not
about the
talking
housing
about. That's what
shortage,
we're
which
about
I have
here.
a plan for. Address what we must
What
do
is
to
your
support
plan?
our small
You
businesses.
have no plan.
Address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice
No, we're
President Harris.
not, because it hasn't been
Excuse me.
fixed.
Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court.
I don't know what
I'm
she said.
winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those
Yeah,
cases
I agree with
was
Trump on
involved with
this.
the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the
that's
Attorney
true.
General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context
Talk
in
about
which this election in
weaponization of the
2024 is
law.
taking place. The United States Supreme Court
Weaponization of the
recently
law.
ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again.
Weaponization of law.
Understand,
Did
this
you
is someone
weaponize
who
the
has
law?
openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States.
Weaponize
that he
the
would
law.
weaponize the Department of Justice
Did you
against
weaponize the
his
law?
political enemies.
Did you weaponize the law? You don't care about the military. Did you weaponize
Certainly
the
know
law?
how the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you.
Because you
Lindsay?
tried to
Vice
use the
President
courts to
Harris,
silence
in your
him.
last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized.
They just turned his mic on because he was talking.
A lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
the
you said you
moderators
wanted
are
to
doing a
ban
decent job,
fracking.
to be honest,
Now
I
you
think.
don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback
cares about
programs for
fracking,
assault
man? I
weapons.
don't
Now your
care.
campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed.
she looks nervous
So then
now.
why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is
Are we all
that
pro
we have
fracking
got
now?
to invest in diverse sources
These
of
are our
energy
choices,
so we
Craig.
reduce our reliance on
is what we're
foreign
dealing with.
oil. We have had
The best people in the room are the
largest
moderators,
increase
unfortunately,
in
tonight.
domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely
You're
on
right,
foreign
Pamela.
oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised
don't
by a
believe you.
hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a
Filing
value that I
bankruptcy
bring
is
to my
strategic.
work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My
She
work
does sound that
is
way.
related
She sounds
to
inebriated. I
having
don't know
a
what it
friend
is.
when I was in high school who
I
was
don't
sexually
think she's
assaulted by her
drunk.
stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime
Maybe it's
is based on a
pharmaceuticals,
value
maybe it's just the
that
way
is
she
deeply
talks, I don't
grounded
know.
in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is
Protect
based on
trans black
long-standing
women?
work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed.
good,
And
but
what is important is that there is a president
But why
who
did your
actually
policies
brings
change, though?
values and a
Why did your
perspective
policies change?
that is
That was the
about
question.
lifting
I
people
forgot it.
up and not beating
Dude, this
people
is so
down.
abstract and
name
stupid.
calling.
Talk
The
about
true
the
measure of
policies.
leader
That was the question.
is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump,
It's
you're-
all about
First of all, I wasn't
intentions. It's
given
not about what she
$400
did.
million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I
They're
was given
both
a fraction
pretending-
of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about
Like
that.
he's Scrooge
Fracking,
McDuck
she's been against
in
it
his
for
house,
12 years.
piles of money, everyone's all
defund
surprised.
the police. She's been
I'd be
against
surprised.
that forever. She gave all that stuff
So now
up.
Trump is pro.
Very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't
Okay.
mind, please.
Okay.
Does that
He
sound familiar?
sounded like, oh,
She went out, in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down
I was about to-
Minneapolis,
I was about
she
to
went
give
out
him
and
shit
raised
for
money
that,
to
but
get him out
he
of
was making
jail.
fun of her.
She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left
CNN reported
liberal
on that.
would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election,
I don't know if she
fracking
will or
in
not.
Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one
Everybody's
thing
pro
so important
fracking.
in my opinion.
thought it was
So,
controversial.
I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar.
Dude, he's getting off there.
400, 500
Why are they
acres
letting him
of
talk? Okay.
desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you.
He should
You
have
have an
stopped a little
election
bit
in
ago.
just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful
That's
transfer
crazy.
of power,
She
which,
wasn't-
of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy and the role of a president
That's what we're
in a
asking
moment
about.
of crisis.
Peaceful
Mr. President, on
transfer of
January
power?
6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said
Okay,
you would be
I don't care
right
about
there
this.
with
I'm gonna
them.
use the bathroom.
The
We'll be
country
back.
and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted?
Really,
or
federal
in
thing,
Seattle?
is it?
They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be
I don't
prosecuted?
know if it was a big percentage,
me
but
just
it was
ask.
You
crazy.
might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech.
This is
I
the
showed
only
up for a
time
speech. I said,
they've
I think
repeated
it's
a
going to be
question.
big. I went
And
to
they've both
Nancy
been dodging
Pelosi and the
questions.
mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid
That's
of that
true.
tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that
How
day,
did he do that? He did not do
law
that.
enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the
Did any
former president
cops
has
actually
been
die that day?
indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation.
Impeached is an
Let's
accusation.
remember Charlottesville,
He was
where
found.
there was
He was
a
acquitted.
mob of people carrying
He
tiki
was proven
torches,
instant.
spewing
God.
anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the
I
Proud
listened
Boys,
to that
a
whole
militia,
speech. He condemned them in that speech. It's a
the
lie.
former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers
One died of a
what
heart attack.
January
Was he
6th
fat?
was,
How did that happen?
I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page.
I'd take January 6th
And if
over
that was a bridge too
millions
far
of
for you, well,
11,
there is a
15
place
million.
in
illegal
our
immigrants?
campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about
Super cop
attacking
Kamala.
the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome.
It's a
And be
republic, brother.
clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's
didn't say
chart
that.
a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it
He's
was
right.
perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of
great if
time.
it ended this
Go
way.
down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide.
Falsely? I mean,
in the
I don't
past
know.
couple of
I
weeks
don't
leading
know
up
if
to
it's
this
real or not.
debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so
Can't make
much
heads or
proof.
tails of that.
All you have to do is look at it. And
I
they
don't
should
think
have
there's
sent
gonna
it
be
back
another
to
one,
the
Craig. I think it's just
legislatures
gonna
for
be this one.
approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got
don't know why that
63,
matters.
which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it.
He's
We
really
have to have
concerned
borders,
immigration, which is
and we have
smart.
to have good
It's very
elections.
important to a
Our
lot of people.
elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No judge
Republican,
looked at it.
and said there
They
was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now
You
is
said
we
that like you
have
said it's
a
fake news.
nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election.
That's not what he said.
That was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly
that
he is
has
having
nothing
a
to
very
do
difficult
with the
time
legitimacy of the
processing that.
election. They're
But
not
we
saying anything.
cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election.
I think
And I'm going
that
to tell
you have to
that
talk about the
I have
legitimacy of the
traveled the
election.
world. That's deeply troubling,
What
and
are
the
you
American
talking
people
about?
deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men.
My
they call him
uncle.
a strong man. He's a
Viktor
tough
Orban.
person.
Love him.
Smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing
That's
up?
true. Why
He said, because
was Trump
you
the
need
first president
Trump back as president. They
since
were
Carter
afraid of
to
him.
not start a
China
war?
was afraid, and I don't like
That's
to use
true.
the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was
Russia
afraid of him. North
started the
Korea
war when
was
he was
afraid
gone.
of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany.
then the
biggest
American government
pipeline
blew it up.
in the land that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he
President.
got 14 million votes. They
14
threw him
million
out.
votes in what
She
context?
got
I don't know what he's
0
talking
votes.
about.
And when she
Oh,
ran,
the
she
primary.
was the first one to
That's
leave
true.
because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm okay
President,
with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war.
Yeah, you got
and the
wrecked by
hostages
Kamala-
were still
or
being held. Americans
you got wrecked by
among
Tulsi
them.
Gabbard.
Vice President Harris, in December, you said,
Nerd.
quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000
that mean in
Palestinians are
practicality, though?
dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
God, can
Well,
we let the desert
let's
people do their
understand
own
how we
thing?
got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of
How
them
many
young people
Palestinians
who
have
were
been dead
simply
since
attending
then?
a concert.
And how many were killed by
Women
Israel
were
before then?
horribly raped. And so absolutely,
any evidence
I said
of
then,
that?
I say now.
There might be.
Israel has a right to defend itself. We would.
What about in the Knesset
And
when
how
they were
it does
talking
so
about
matters. Because
rape
it
by
is
Israeli
also
soldiers
true,
that
far too many
seemingly
innocent
Israeli
Palestinians
citizens
have been
support?
killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must
What does that
end
mean?
immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to
Whose
work
hostages?
around the clock on that.
Israel has
Work around the clock,
thousands,
also
tens of
understanding
thousands
that we
probably,
must
of
chart a
Palestinian
course for a
hostages.
two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always,
Talk about the
I will
settlers.
always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump,
But
how
your
would you
administration is
negotiate with
funding a genocide.
Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were
gonna
president,
bring up
it
the
would have
Gazan
never started.
hostages.
If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up. Far
Did
worse
that
than
happen?
people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu
No,
when
she
he went to
doesn't.
Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates
What?
Israel. if she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope
right.
I'm wrong about that one.
I'm voting
She
for Kamala
hates
Harris.
Israel.
Never mind.
At the same time, in her own
That's what
way,
we're going for.
she hates the Arab population because the
Okay, so she
whole
hates both of
place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel. Israel will be gone. It would have never happened.
What is he
Iran was
talking
broke
about right
under
now?
Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen.
The Houthis. We've already been talking about them for a long time. A whole lot cooler if he did. He's been the best on foreign policy. It's my favorite thing about him. Yeah, Yemen is messed up, Craig. Didn't Trump say that though? I mean, I support that. I don't care. I'm not going to be a dictator except for day one. I think that's what he said. Okay.
And it is
He reached
absolutely
historic
well known
peace in
that
Korea.
these dictators
That was a
and
good thing.
autocrats are rooting
You
for
are an
you to
autocrat.
be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And
might
that
be
is
true.
why
That one might be true.
so many military leaders who you have
They
worked
didn't
with
start a war.
have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we
It's not
understand
representative
that
of the
we
military
have to have
population
a
in the United
president
States.
who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline
understand
anywhere
what
in the world, going
approving
to Germany and all
from
over
an American
Europe,
perspective means
because they're
in
weak and
Europe.
they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
That's
gets
their
paid a
deal,
lot of
right?
money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in
God.
Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
This is only happening in a few hours for me. What are
The
we doing now?
ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
This
don't they
PBS
just have a
News
boxing
presentation is made possible by
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket. Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing. Have a nice day.
Just waiting now. Any thoughts? Anybody? in
and by the
chat?
Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
That's what we're doing until it's back. I got it in the other monitor. Crab Raven. I hope this doesn't get the stream down, but if it does, it's worth it. Yeah, that's a good point, Pablo. That's what I'm talking about. It's like Europe did want it. Like, I don't understand what they mean that Biden approved it. I literally don't even know what they're talking about or what Trump is talking about. They approved it. Like, the American president, are they just like, is it mask off? Are they just going totally mask off? They're like, all right, yeah, the American government does approve what happens in Europe because it's a colony of the United States government. I don't understand. I don't know. But, and no one brings that up because I guess everyone's just assuming, yeah, the American government controls Europe. And then the reporting from Seymour Hersh, that's his name, right? A sci-fi story about crabs on an island. Were you the one that... Oh, somebody told me recently about a sci-fi book from China. Oh, that's in an episode of the podcast that's coming out soon from Atham Flyer. Yeah, that was a good talk. It's a Chinese book I'm going to be reading. It sounded pretty good. I don't understand the whole approval of the Nord Stream pipeline. It's in Europe, Germany. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I get, live streams to 15, 20 people. I love that. There's plenty of people that come back all the time. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. We're growing. We got plenty of listeners. I want more, obviously, but we're doing okay. I really don't want the debate to start again. I just want to do crab rave for the next 24 minutes. The moderators are doing a good job, honestly. I feel like they're pretty unbiased. As somebody who's like slightly towards Trump, a little bit more than slightly, but historically I'm an independent, right? And it's like, I'm for Trump in this election, but that really is because of foreign policy in war. I think all that stuff was fake. Like Trump, there was no wars. I don't want any war. So that's good. And then the immigration had actually started going way down at the end of Obama's administration. But then it collapsed under Trump. It continued to go way down. And it skyrockets under Kamala. And it's at a level, or under Biden, Kamala. It's a major problem in America. It's a major problem in a lot of countries. Not even just like Europe and Canada and the US. There's a bunch of others. Like my Fabian from Chile, my friend, he was talking about having issues with immigrants in Chile from other parts of South America who don't have the same like good history that Chile does. It's historically a pretty good country. I should say here, she's not answering the questions, but a lot of the times, I don't know who's doing it more, but I think Trump is also not answering the questions. I don't like that's a normal thing. All right. Unfortunately, we got to stop the crab rave. We're coming back.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate.
I like the moderators. They have a hard job.
Ukraine, we're now 2.5 years,
and they're doing a good job of it.
Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration.
The media is becoming reasonable while the politicians become less so.
Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Craig. Yes, hit the subscribe button.
That
like,
it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries.
Yeah, Fabian was complaining specifically about Venezuelans and others.
Hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look,
we love Hispanics on the show.
We're in for 250 billion or more
for a long time
because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know.
They did do that.
Is he our president?
It was kind of
but
crazy.
We have a president that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
I don't understand how Ukraine winning the war. I don't even understand what that means.
Human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Apparently.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here.
Do not
I
defend
actually met with Zelensky
war right
a few
now.
days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to define
why did he
one of
do
the most
that?
important
What were the
international
Ukrainians
rules
doing
and norms,
to
which
Russian
is the importance
speakers
of
in eastern
sovereignty and
Ukraine?
territorial integrity. And I met with
Why did they
President
want to make a
Zelensky.
peace
I shared
deal
with him American intelligence
before that
about
British
how he could
dude went
defend
over there?
himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank.
We don't give
to
up.
Poland
We just
and Romania.
let hundreds of thousands of men die,
And through the work that
and
I
women.
and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense.
This war didn't
and
have to happen.
because of our support, because
of those
of the
people had to die.
air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided,
Dude, this is crazy.
Ukraine stands as an independent and
None of
free
these
country.
wars are good.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
Every single
And
one of these
understand
wars
what that would mean.
is an
Because
absolute
Putin's
scam.
agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO.
Yeah.
And what
like
we
I don't
have
want to
done
kill
to
Russians.
preserve
I don't want to
the
have
ability of Zelensky and the
bunch of
Ukrainians to
Ukrainians
fight
die.
for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up
Are there
for the
800,000
sake
Polish
of
Americans
favor
in Pennsylvania
and what you think
alone?
is a friendship.
I know there's a lot.
with what
but
is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've
Speaking
heard
of a
from both
Polish
you on
American from
Ukraine tonight.
Pennsylvania,
Afghanistan
that's
came up in
Kyle
the last hour.
from
I
5
wanted
till
to respond
midnight.
to something you said earlier, and I'll please.
Yeah, dude,
I'll give
they
you a
don't
minute
know.
here.
They don't know.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow.
Quiet, please.
Much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her.
I don't even know if that
She's
happened or
worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's
It's so
the worst
hard to check
president
their
in the
facts.
history of
They're
our
both
country.
lying.
She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning.
I'm not
of the
sure
debate,
that was
you're
the
going to hear a
question.
bunch
That's
of
not what he
lies
said.
coming from this fellow, and that is another one.
That's not what he
When
said,
I went
though.
to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times.
Said she
The
went to
reality is,
negotiate
it
peace.
has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for
We were
our
not
friends
allied with Ukraine.
and not favor our enemies because you adore
Dude, that's like
strong men
Russia's
instead
Canada.
of caring about
You gotta leave them
democracy.
something, man.
And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president
And he got
who
less
understands the
of us
significance of America's
than any other
role and
president in the
responsibility
last 30 years.
in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Dude, they
got
turn the
these
mics off, but they
countries,
just turn them on
28
whenever they wanna
countries
talk.
at the time to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate,
Yeah, let him
and we
talk about
witnessed a
Afghanistan. You've
poignant
got to
moment
win
today on
on
Capitol
that.
Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
That's an interesting question.
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to
Do
pull
you
out
bear
of
any
Afghanistan.
responsibility?
4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world the first time this
That's not true.
century. But let's understand
not
how we
true.
got to where we are.
They're
Donald
there.
Trump, when he was president,
They're just not there officially.
negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the
rightful government
Taliban
of
getting
Afghanistan.
5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be Commander-in-Chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul.
He did do that.
And for
He
18
did
months,
do that.
we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason
crazy.
it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost
Clinton
the soldiers.
had
We
Yasser
wouldn't have
Arafat
left
to Camp
many
David.
Americans behind,
I
and
didn't
we
know
wouldn't
that.
have left. We wouldn't have left
Where is Camp David?
$85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful
He's
military
right.
equipment
They
behind.
left all that
And just
stuff
to
there
finish,
so that they could buy new
they
stuff.
blew it.
Oh, that's in
The
Maryland.
agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't
outside
do
of
it.
DC, I
They
assume.
didn't do it. The agreement
they left all of that
was
gear there for
terminated
them.
by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I wanna move
And
on.
these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my
Yeah, it
opinion,
was.
the
It was
most
very bad.
embarrassing moment in the history
Clinton
of our
had
country.
Yasser
And by the
Arafat.
way,
He
that's why
also
Russia
attacked the Serbs
Ukraine,
for
because they
some
saw how
dumbass reason.
incompetent
I don't know why we got involved
and
in
her
that.
boss are.
President Trump, thank you.
Shout out Pavle.
I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care.
Good verse.
You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your
Can
words.
identify
I
as
don't know.
whatever you
I don't
want.
know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
How?
You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was
Say what he
land,
did, don't
owned
label him.
land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated
estate
because
investor?
he refused to rent.
She
Property
is
to black
whatever.
families.
She's a chameleon.
Let's remember, this is the same individual
I don't.
who
do that?
took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5.
They were not innocent.
Took
they
out
were
a
not
full-page
innocent.
ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American
I don't
people
know if those are lies.
want better
just
than
don't know.
that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless
Can't do
of
that when you're
people's color
importing in
or the
tens of
language
millions
their
of illegal
grandmother
immigrants.
speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive
Wait, is that Hillary Clinton?
presidency
Did Hillary Clinton start that?
in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with
Yeah,
things
look, the
like
immigration, man. That's
what you
that's
just
the most
said.
important thing.
going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5. They admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty,
those
they badly hurt a
guilty.
person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with
It's a
that.
monetary phenomenon. It has to do with the Federal Reserve.
I want to just respond briefly.
Elevation.
Clearly,
inflation
I am
is
not
a
Joe
monetary
Biden.
phenomenon.
And I am certainly
You're
not
kind of
Donald
Joe Biden.
Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes
Why? Because you're only 60
in what is
instead of like
possible.
80?
One who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our
What's your
plans.
plan?
And
What's your plan?
And let's compare the plans.
What's your
I have
plan?
a plan.
What
To
is your
give
plan?
startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical
I agree
stage
with
of your
that.
child's development. I have a
good
plan
policy.
that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the
don't believe
American
her.
dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation I believe,
Houses probably
David,
go up
that people really
$25,000.
want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that
Probably
is
got to raise the
constantly
fixed
about
economy.
belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump,
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police.
And
She
they-
has a
dude, they
plan
just let
to
him go.
confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
I don't
what
know
her
why
plan
he's
is
doing this.
until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond because
Trump-
no, the
President
former
Trump-
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said,
would
quote,
be
we're
better?
working on it. So tonight,
gonna do?
9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan?
Agreed, Craig.
And can
That
you
did
tell
not
us
look
what
good
it
for
is?
him.
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up, they wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away.
That's a really
I
good
decided,
answer
and I
this
told
gave.
my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice
It was
to
a
make.
good
Do I save
aside,
it
but-
and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with
Trump
a plan
for
that's going to
Medicare for
cost
all right now.
our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
I have
I'm not
concepts
president
of a
right now.
plan.
But if we
Not good.
come up with something, I would only change it if we come up
least
with
I'm having
something
fun
that's
here,
better
man.
and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away.
I don't care
Tim
about
Walz and I are
fracking. I
both
don't know
gun owners.
why
We're not
anyone
taking
does. I don't know
anybody's
where
guns
this is
away.
coming
So
from.
stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable
like
Care
that.
Act, understand,
If
let's
she sticks
just
by
look at the
that.
history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate.
Don't you
And
guys
the
take, like,
late,
half the
great
year off?
John McCain,
Oh my
who you
God.
have
He's not
disparaged
good.
as being, you don't like him, you said at the time
he
because
sucks.
he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great
Okay,
John
he
McCain, I
should've
will
said
never
that, but
forget
yeah.
that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable
Which
Care
was-
Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care
war
Act has
pig.
done is eliminate
Right,
the
Craig.
ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did.
So,
And now
paying
we
for
have
her,
capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass this
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made
of
a mistake.
Have a cat.
At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him.
one
It
of
was
these people,
all of the
huh?
Democrats that kept it going. And you know what?
She hates me. Okay.
We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give.
President
People
Trump-
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to
care.
the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call
with that,
climate
though.
change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know
is.
is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has
Greg would vote for my cat.
experienced
Thank
these
you.
extreme
I
weather
think my cat would do a
occurrences,
better
who
job
now is either being denied
either of
home
these
insurance
people.
or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. it's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate.
To be 90 minutes.
From Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right. I can't believe they're doing another
ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
This PBS News presentation is made possible.
I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. They're not back yet. God, this is so much better than listening to Trump and Kamala. Oh, yeah, their network's just trying to make money. Of course. Need more peanuts. I'm out of peanuts. I can't imagine what their closing statements are going to be. Probably something really dumb. Oh. Nope. Brought it back prematurely. I don't know. I don't know how the normies will think. I assume, you know, most of the people here are going to be for Trump. I don't know. I think Kamala did better than I thought she was going to. I think as far as just the debate, it kind of depends on what your opinions are. I think Trump did better because he concentrated on the things that I cared about, but that's kind of up to any individual person, right? But who the normies will think, I don't know. not them. We back? Nope, we're not back. Yeah, I mean, it's the economy, it's the taxes, and it's the immigration, and that's it for me. And the war, and all those things. I'm for Trump. There's some things I like about Kamala, but it's not the most important stuff to me. I would vote for Harambe with the vice president of Sweet Meteor of Doom. I think if Sweet Meteor of Doom was the president and Harambe was the vice president, I'd still go for Trump. All right, here we go.
David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back
Dude,
tonight.
Plato
The
and
time has come
Diogenes
for
would be
closing
far better.
statements, and Vice President Harris,
Yes.
we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country.
You're not that different.
One that is focused on the
You
future.
both love Israel.
And the other that is focused on the past.
You are the
And
president.
an attempt to take
and
us
we're screwed
backward.
right now.
But we're not going back.
I want to go back to 2019.
And I do believe that
I used to
the
say
American
2005.
people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us.
Prefer
and we can
2005 to
chart
2019,
a new
but
way
it was better.
forward.
Oh
and
my God.
a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition
gotta deport
of the
people,
American
dude.
people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy,
You never did
investing
any
in
of
small
this stuff.
businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors.
Your
what we
administration
can do that is
oversaw the
about
bankruptcy of the
giving
most
hardworking folks a
small
break
businesses
and bringing
in
down the
our
cost of
history.
living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have
woman's
her
right
government
to end the
tell her what
lives
to
of
do.
babies
I'll
that
tell you,
result
I
from
started
her
my
own
career
actions.
as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor,
You
I
mean
never
yourself.
asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked
It'd
them,
be weird if
are
you
you
did.
okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now.
You're a
Someone
prosecutor.
who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Wait, build back up our country,
Vice
like build
President
back better?
Harris, thank you.
in 2020?
President Trump.
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that
why
are
are they
going to make
concentrating
this
so much
country
on
strong,
fracking?
whether you like it or not.
I don't get that.
Germany
Where is that
tried
coming from?
And within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants.
Why don't
We're
they
not
just
ready
build
for
nuclear
it.
power
We
plants? They're
can't
closing them down
sacrifice
instead.
our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on. with Russia and Ukraine, we're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no
That's
other
just the
because of
one war,
nuclear
bro.
weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan.
Okay, the military
what
is not the
these people
actual,
have done to our
like,
country,
weapons.
and maybe toughest of all is allowing millions of people to come into our
Oh,
country.
thank
Many
you,
of them
Craig.
are criminals.
That makes a
and
lot
they're
of sense, that
destroying
they're
our country.
concentrating so much
the
on
worst
fracking then.
president, the worst
Okay.
vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump.
So they're
thank
concentrating on
you.
Pennsylvania
And that
because it's
is
a
our
swing
ABC
state
News
and the number one for
presidential debate
fracking.
From here in
That makes
Philadelphia,
a
the
lot
National
of sense now.
Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching
Okay.
here in the U.S. and all over the world. And
So
from
I guess
all
that's
of us
it.
here at ABC
Thank the
News.
Lord.
Good night.
I did a 4.5 hour stream the other day, watching a bunch of different videos, some frustrating stuff with Flint Dibble, a bunch of different stuff. That one was just way worse than anything. That was just terrible. I mean, God, good thing there won't be another one of these. I might do the vice presidential debate. That'll be a goof fest, man. Those two goofy dudes, man. I'll probably be on for that one. It depends on when it happens. But yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. And I'll talk to you soon.